question would reduce sales and use tax to 3% from its current 6.25% effective this January 1st. Mr. Rotundo.
Thank you. Excellent question. This is one of the main problems of the incumbent in this position. Raising taxes when we are facing the worst economic times, I believe, is the wrong message, sends the wrong message for business. Okay? 2 years ago, I proposed what I call a reform first plan, and I still propose it today. Meaning, across the board, 1% state budget cuts for agencies, and focusing on reform and efficiencies first. Implementing those reforms and savings, and bringing them back to the community through property tax relief and education funding. Okay. I also believe that the sales tax should not be rolled back to 3%. I think it should be back to 5%, where I supported it 10 years ago. I think that would make the best approach in this economy.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
I will be voting no on question 3. The Taxpayers Foundation, which is a business-backed, nonpartisan group, recently released a report on question 3, which said that if this is successful, it will have catastrophic consequences for the well-being of our state. Because of the fiscal crisis that we're in, caused by the global recession, our state is already facing a $2 billion budget gap going into the next fiscal year that we're going to have to close. If question 3 were to pass, that would take out another $2.5 billion from our state budget. So we would have a $4.5 billion gap. And by law, we have to have a balanced budget. That would require cuts pretty much across the board on the order of about 25%. So everything we've seen so far in terms of cutbacks, many things that are essential services would be nothing compared to what we would be facing. It would impact our public schools, funding for all of the programs that we enjoy for our kids. It would impact funding for public safety, for our libraries, for health care, for our social safety net, and environmental protections. Nothing would be spared. I understand the frustration that many people feel in tough times. None of us want to have to give our hard-earned dollars in taxes. But I don't believe that the answer is to reduce the sales tax to 3%. That's certainly not the answer that Winchester said.
Thank you. Mr. Gerson.
Just call me George. That's what I always tell.
I may switch over to that. I keep stumbling on it. What is your question? Answer on question 3.
I actually agree with the folks here on the dais today that question 3 deserves a no vote. Though, I also agree with those who want to vote yes on question 3. Those folks really want and need to send a message. A no vote on question 3 would leave the impression in the legislature, which is dominated by tax and spend progressives, that, hey, raising taxes was an option. Those folks who are voting yes on 3, I think would agree with the statistics that Jason told us, that it would cause severe problems in the budgetary and expenditure issues of the state, and would really cut a little too close to home on the programs and the initiatives that the state needs to fund. So I see where the people who vote yes on 3 are coming from. But a lot of folks who are voting yes on 3 are doing so to send a message. Karen Polito, the Republican nominee for treasurer in the Commonwealth, has said it herself. Vote yes on question 3 to get to a 5% sales tax. And I would add to that a yes on 3 would also push the legislature to reduce the sales income tax to 5%, and the corporate tax to 5%, the 5-5-5 plan, which will create stability in society so that folks and businesses know that they're at a level playing field. Though personally I will be voting no on question 3. I certainly understand the frustrations that the folks who vote yes on it want it to happen.
Thank you. Candidates, timers, I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that, and we'll have 1 minute response, please. If the voters do pass question 3, how do you propose the state will deal with the loss of revenues? We'll continue in that same order.
Do you want, shouldn't we rotate?
No, this is all the same part of the same question. So
I'm sorry,
if it passes, how do you propose the state will deal with the loss of revenues?
Well, again, that goes back to my reform first plan, is that we're going to have to make the cuts and adjustments to balance the budget. And it's going to be significantly more difficult if it passes. That's why I support a phase back to 5 and not to 3. But if we have to do the 3, we're going to have to make the huge adjustments to state budgets. And there's a lot of room there. I've had experience with it. I know where to go after it. And that's the difference. The incumbent always is going to tax first, okay? Not reform first, tax first. And I think that's the wrong approach.
Thank you. 1 minute, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you. I think it's disingenuous for my opponents to say they personally be voting against question 3. But it's okay if it happens. It will send a message, and the legislature will figure it out and maybe put the sales tax back to 5%. Well, that's not going to happen. Certainly, if I'm faced with this, I have to honor the will of the voters. It would be an appropriately passed ballot question approved by the Attorney General, 10,000 signatures, and we have to honor the will of the voters. So we need to face the consequences if this were to pass. And 2 things will happen. There will be, as I mentioned before, catastrophic cutbacks in state services across the board, 25%. This is not my words. This is the Mass Taxpayers Foundation that will hit our schools, public safety, our libraries, our environmental protections, our social safety net, everything we count on to make our community strong. And number 2, this will just push more of the burden down onto our communities and put even more pressure on property taxes. You all have seen the increase in property taxes. If the state doesn't have the revenue to provide local aid, then our communities will have to raise property taxes even further and just push the cost down. That's certainly not the answer.
And Mr. President.
It's funny to hear Jason, who's only been there for 2 years, seems to ignore his colleagues, the progressives in the legislature, routinely ignore the will of ballot questions that pass. I recall a few years ago, the death penalty passed in Massachusetts. It's still illegal here in Massachusetts because of the initiatives of the legislature, not following the will of the people. I recall a few years ago, the folks in ballot initiatives voted to repeal the income tax, not repeal the income tax, but to reduce it back to 5% when it was 5.85%. Today, the income tax is still 5.3%. So again, the message issue is very important. But there are areas that we have to deal with it, we'll deal with it, whether it's furloughs, shifting Medicare type of programs from the systems that they're in now to a more managed care system. There is room to make those cuts, but they will be devastating, and it's not going to be easy if that passes and the legislature follows the will of the people this time.
Thank you. Moving on. The Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education won $27 million to pilot an ambitious new program that looks at different pay structures for teachers based on performance. Do you support pay for performance for teachers? And we'll start right in the middle, please.
The short answer is yes. As you heard before I ran for office, I worked in the business world for about 15 years, and everywhere I've ever worked was a meritocracy. People are incented and rewarded for their performance and for their achievement, and I do think that should carry over into our public sector as well. That said, it's not a simple situation because the challenge is how do you measure a given teacher's performance. It's very different if you're a kindergarten teacher or if you're a math teacher in high school. We do have standardized testing, and we do have some ability to see how students are performing and how they're improving, but that's only one measure of a teacher's performance. So I think the key to having some kind of performance-based metrics for public education, our teachers, is having a very comprehensive assessment system for our teachers that looks at more than just standardized tests, and along with that, a professional development and a support system for our teachers that gives them the support that needs, that helps them integrate new technologies and other new programs into their classrooms, and that frankly treats them with respect. Our teachers oftentimes don't get the respect that they deserve, and so any kind of performance-based system needs to recognize the critical role they play in future generations, and be done, as I said, with respect for our teachers.
Thank you.
You know, Jason, what you just said sounds totally nonpartisan and absolutely correct. I agree with what you just said. A merit-based system is something that we need to move forward to, but you can't just look at how you measure the test scores. There are a lot of areas where teachers can be measured for progress across the board. And so in that aspect, I totally agree with what Jason said. The issue here, though, is that we have to face a very active union base that dominates our teachers' unions and sometimes puts the need of the unions first before the needs of our kids. And it's funny, when you talk about these merit pay structures, the folks who oppose it the most are the teachers' unions. And I don't want to come across as being anti-teachers' unions. The teachers' unions are vital. They play a very important role. But there's got to be fairness. There's got to be a give and take. And I think we need to take this money that has come in to study the issue, to look at the ways that merit-based pay could work, and takes into account not just, like Jason said, test scores, other areas. We have a lot of students in special needs programs whose teachers do a whole lot of work, do an excellent job with them, and the test result scheme is not going to provide the kind of merit-based pay raises that you'll see in those areas. So I certainly applaud the receipt of those funds, and we need to look at it, but we have to, at the end of the day, look at what is best for our students, the people who, and parents who are the recipients of the very important services that our hardworking teachers provide.
This is a great question. I'm a product of my local public school system here. Many of my family have been. We've seen fantastic teachers, and we've seen teachers that aren't so great. We need a merit-based system. The root of the matter is, how are we going to get that done in the state legislature? The incumbent is heavily funded by the Mass Teachers Association. Okay? Changes to this merit-based system are just not going to happen with the incumbent. That's it. I'm going to go there, I'm going to have an open mind. No one's paying for my campaign. No one's sending you 15 mailers telling you what you want to hear. Okay? I'm telling it like it is. I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to make sure that we have a merit-based system and try to make some changes.
Thank you. We're going to start with George this time. We've covered ballot question 3. We're going to move to ballot question number 2. Created by the legislature to boost the state's affordable housing stock, Chapter 40B has evoked strong and mixed reactions. Some praise it as an important tool that ensures every community is doing its fair share to develop affordable housing. Others condemn it as a program that allows developers to reap huge profits while circumventing local zoning laws. On November 2nd, voters will be asked to repeal sections of Chapter 40B under ballot question 2, the comprehensive permits for low or moderate income housing. Question: do you support affordable housing in Stoneham and Winchester? Specifically, do you support Chapter 40B?
Great question. I do support Chapter 40B, and in the introduction, you heard that I'm a real estate attorney. So I work with folks who are recipients of housing, who need housing, who are purchasing property under the 40B program. And by and large, for those folks, it works. I know that for a fact. I have clients that have benefited from it. Obviously, 40B's got some problems. And in my view, we really need to reform 40B before we repeal it. So I will be voting no on question 2. But there are a lot of concerns out there about the formula and how 40B projects come about. I have to commend the community newspaper company, the managers of both Winchester Star and the Sterling Sun, who provided us with questions of the week, which I think were excellent opportunities for us to get some ideas out to the voters. And one of the questions dealt with 40B. And I was kind of surprised with Jason's response, where I think he and I agreed on the point that we're going to vote no on question 2, but he said it's very important that we manage the profits of developers. Yes, the developers need to come to the table, and the towns and cities need to work together so that 40B will work and the reform of 40B will be better. But the mentality of managing profits really doesn't get us where we want to be. We don't want the state kind of involved in managing how the private sector is able to provide the services. What we need is a 40B system that keeps control in the places where it belongs. In our Board of Selectmen, our zoning boards, and the like, that the state government doesn't trump those very important roles that they play. So I'm for reform before repeal. I'm voting no on question 2.
Thank you.
Again, reform is the key. And how do you accomplish the reform? Whether you tear down 40B and hopefully that'll create a reform movement to make it different or better, or you vote against the change and you go back to, I'm for reform, I'm going to vote against the change because I think you can reform it internally. I believe that we can do that. I think it's a problem with 40B. For example, let's look at a big problem. There's been 40B proposal project for the reuse of the hospital project in Stoneham. It's been stalled for over 10 years. Stoneham is a community that needs that extra money through smart, environmentally sensitive development, and it's just not happening. There's a bad example of it. So we need reforms. You got to look at who is really going to be in there and fighting for your interest in making the reforms that are going to happen. I'm going to do that.
Thank you. I came to Massachusetts originally as a college student, and as we all do, love living in this area. It's a wonderful place to live, to raise your children, to work. But as we all know, one of the biggest challenges facing Massachusetts, and particularly the greater Boston area, is how expensive our housing stock is. And this is a critical economic issue because when we have young families that are just starting out here, they can't afford housing, they're going to leave the state. For our seniors who have maybe spent their whole life here and maybe want to downsize but stay in their community, that becomes enormously difficult when housing is so expensive. Chapter 40B was put in place, I think it was in the late 60s, early 70s, to try to really be proactive in addressing the need for more affordable housing. It's not perfect. This is a very difficult, complex issue, and no law is going to get this right all the time. But it has had a significant positive impact. More than 50,000 units of affordable housing have been built in that time period, which would not have been built if it hadn't been for Chapter 40B in place. That's allowing young families to stay here, working families, and our seniors. We do need to make some changes to Chapter 40B, and one of those changes is exactly the point that my Republican opponent referred to, which is we absolutely do need to make sure that unscrupulous developers, who are not the majority, they're the minority, but unscrupulous developers don't take advantage of this law to earn excessive profits, perhaps with the help of real estate attorneys, like my opponent. So we absolutely need those kinds of reforms, and we need to make sure this law is working for our communities and they're not being run roughshod by those developers. But the vast majority of developers, many of whom are actually the nonprofits, are doing this responsibly and are adding affordable housing to our stock.
Thank you. I'm going to start with you again. Everyone is concerned about the economy. How do you feel the economy is doing in Massachusetts? And what are you doing or will you do to promote job growth in our district? No,
Sure.
how's the economy doing in Massachusetts, and what are you doing to promote job growth in our district? Or what are your plans?
This is the biggest challenge, of course, that's facing us. And as I mentioned, opening statement, we have been suffering the consequences of the housing collapse, which then led to collapse, or near collapse of our financial system and a global recession that resulted from that. Working families and Main Street has unfortunately had felt the impact of what's happened on Wall Street. And I've had the unfortunate occasion many times to talk with constituents here in Winchester and Stoneham who are at risk of losing their home, who are facing unemployment and also having trouble paying their bills. So this is a critical issue. We, in the state legislature and the governor, this has been our top priority. We have invested in job creation. A very significant piece of legislation was passed earlier this year to create the Massachusetts Growth Capital Agency, which is going to help small businesses get greater access to capital. It also provides a cut in the capital gains tax rate for investors in Massachusetts-based startup companies to encourage our entrepreneurial culture, and it does a wide range of other things to help our small businesses and our economy get growing again. The fact is, we still have a long way to go. We still have too many people who are out of work, but as I said earlier, Massachusetts is on the mend. We are growing faster than any other state in the country, with perhaps a single exception of Texas, and they're certainly a lot larger than we are. We've added more than 60,000 new jobs this year alone. So the policies that we've had to invest in education, healthcare, and our innovation economy are paying off.
Mike, please go ahead.
Yes, this is a critical question. We need to be focusing on jobs and economic development. It's about local issues. The incumbent has used tax increases, healthcare costs, unemployment insurance. All these things are whacking small businesses and sending a message: do not do business in Massachusetts, see you later. That's the message. We need to send a different message, and that's what I want to take to the stations. We cannot continue to do this and chase business out of Massachusetts. This is going to kill us in the long run. We need those revenues. My family is made up of a bunch of small local businesses, been here for 100 years. Okay, I get complaints all the time. They're trying to create jobs, and it's difficult. Okay, I know what it's like to feel the pain of losing a job and struggling with unemployment and full-time employment. We need someone who has that extra motivation to do that. I have it. I'm going to make the reform first plan. I was way ahead of the curve on this. We needed to be doing that 2 years ago. We still need to do it now. I'm ready to go there with these ideas and work with like-minded officials and get things moving.
Before I answer the question, I just want to make one thing very clear from the last question. I certainly do not represent developers. I represent the buyers of the low-income housing. I have clients who are purchasing those. So I'm totally on the side of the folks who have it important. But back to this question here. The best way to grow jobs in an economy that is slowing down is to keep taxes fair and low, and to make regulations fair. Mike referred to his personal knowledge. I'm an attorney that practices real estate law. In the last 4 years, I've seen a 40% decrease in my income, to the point where I had to take a second job as a limo driver. I'm not embarrassed about that. You do what you have to do in an economy like this. I cannot, as a small business owner now, go out and hire another attorney to work in my firm or a paralegal, because the cost, and I don't want to hire somebody without providing them the services and the benefits that they deserve, like full care health care, or at least 80% health care, workers' compensation. I cannot afford it as a small business owner. This is the problem we see across the state. We see the state not acting as our partner, but in a slow economy, their first result is to go raise taxes so they can provide programs to create jobs. 60,000 jobs this year. They may have gained 60,000 jobs, but we've had a net loss of over 300,000 jobs in Massachusetts during the Patrick administration. So, yes, we're on the right track. in some ways because of Massachusetts, because of the type of economy that's here, based on hospitals and education services and the like. We need to make sure that the entrepreneur, the real provider of jobs, has the tools and the stability and the regime available to help them. Because once we hire more people, those folks become taxpayers, and then revenue to the state goes up.
Thank you. Trying to switch gears a little bit here. Who is your role model for leadership and why? Start in the front.
I think that's George.
My turn or the last one? Doesn't matter.
We had Jason and then.
We've had, we'll start with Mike. We'll get around to starting with everyone.
I'm a moderator, so I tend to want to be fair here. But anyway, I'm sorry, the question was who was.
Mike, you're a good moderator. Keep that job.
Thank you.
Who is your role model for leadership? Why?
This is a sort of a personal question. I think the best role model that I've had has been my parents, really. Both my mother and father. My father has always been an active town meeting goer, kind of set the bug in me to participate at a young age. That's why I got involved so young, right out of college, wanting to serve and participate and try to make a difference. And then I think my mother really takes the cake as a role model because my grandmother had Alzheimer's disease. Absolutely. She took care of her for 7 years. And that was great stuff.
Thank you. George.
Role models we see every day in our lives, and I'm really fortunate that my role model is also very personal. I look to my parents who are here tonight. My dad was a small business owner, owned a restaurant like a lot of the Greeks across the state. At the age of 11, I worked as a busboy, and there's nothing better than working next to your dad as a kid, learning the value of hard work and responsibility. And lucky enough, my father-in-law is also here today. And growing up, my wife always tells me that her dad was never around because he was working 2 or 3 jobs to make sure that his kids were well prepared for and had the resources and money available and focus on education. Look, that generation is an amazing generation, especially, and this is very personal, from the Greek immigrants. They all came to this country, and they never asked for a dime from the state, never did anything. And in one generation, we have a JD in our family, we have PhDs, we have CPAs. It's just an amazing thing, and you see it with immigrant groups across the spectrum. That's the amazing thing about this country. On a more political view or the public view, we are very lucky in Massachusetts that we elected Scott Brown as our senator. On the political side, I look to Senator Brown as a model. He got elected as a Republican in the bluest of states. And when he went there, he did what's right for this Commonwealth. He votes with the Democrats, and the Democrats have a program that benefits us. And they'll vote with the Republicans when their initiatives seem to be better for the state. That's the political model that I follow, but I'm really lucky that I have the personal models that I do, which I follow every day. Thank you.
Thank you.
As some folks may know, I was born in South Africa and was very fortunate to be able to come with my family to immigrate to America when I was 12 years old. I lived in South Africa in the 1970s, and as you know, that was during under the oppressive apartheid system. Because of the color of my skin, I wasn't discriminated against, but I saw what impact that had on 80% of the population. And I credit my childhood experience with why I'm doing what I'm doing now, because when I arrived in the U.S., I went into 7th grade, and I remember most of my classmates, weren't all that interested in U.S. history. They were kind of bored. They had other things on their mind. But I thought U.S. history and our Constitution and our Bill of Rights and democracy was incredible, because I had just come from a country that didn't have that. So for me, my personal hero, and many you can choose from, but I would have to say Nelson Mandela. I would never have thought that we could have seen a peaceful transition to a democracy in South Africa without horrible bloodshed. And really, I think that was due to his incredible vision, courage, determination, and his leadership when he finally got out of prison after more than 20 years and led the country to peace and reconciliation. And obviously, he's been a model for human rights and civil rights and leadership all around the world.
Thank you. This question is regarding the cost of health insurance for municipal employees. Under state law, the legislature and the governor set the premium contribution rate for state employees. The Group Insurance Commission establishes the plan design, and state employee health benefits are not subject to collective bargaining. But at the local level, state law requires cities and towns to bargain virtually all aspects on health insurance, including the premium contribution and plan design. So, starting with George, what is your position on the cities and towns of Massachusetts joining the Group Insurance Commission without approval by the unions?
It is critical. In this economy, with our budget, it is critical. We in Stoneham did adopt the GIC program for our municipal employees, and it has seen a savings of close to $1 million in our town. Here in Winchester, the selectmen, to their credit, sought the same thing, but were faced the roadblocks that were thrown in front of them by their own senator, Senator Jalen. It is important, if you're going to be cutting in a budget system like ours, which obviously is going to be necessary, at least let the folks who are benefiting from programs get the programs. If you're going to have to cut somewhere, this seems like a reasonable area that is a no-brainer for cities and towns to reduce their overhead and their expenses, but at the same time providing the necessary services to their municipal employees. Absolutely, that must be done. And if I'm elected, I'm certainly going to be working to make sure that cities and towns can join the GIC with ease.
Jason?
First, let me say I think this issue is really a symptom of a much larger challenge that we're facing, which is continued escalation in healthcare costs. And that is, I believe, the greatest challenge facing our businesses, the small and medium-sized, many struggling families. And it's also the biggest budget buster for local government, state government, and federal government. So the bigger issue here is how do we continue to make healthcare accessible to people and high quality but affordable. I hope we actually have a chance to talk more about that in the course of this debate. Moving to this specific question, I think I just want to point out one key difference that you may not have mentioned when you set up the question. Although state employees don't bargain over their health insurance, they have a voice and they have a seat at the table because they actually have representatives that serve on the board of the state's health insurance authority, the GIC. So they are not completely shut out of the process, and they do have the ability to weigh in. When it comes to municipal employees, the tax administration and the legislature have gone further on this issue than any prior administration in Massachusetts before. Towns and cities can now join the GIC. That didn't used to be the case. Stoneham has gone ahead and joined the state's health insurance and has been largely successful in saving money for the community, and many other communities have done so as well. I do believe we need to go further because many towns and cities haven't joined for a variety of different reasons. And I think there are things we can do to make sure that the savings are not just at the expense of people who are the most unfortunate, who have chronic conditions, who may be in a terrible accident. We don't want to just shift the burden onto them. So we need things like health reimbursement accounts to make sure that that's not what happens, that we realize real savings. And we need to continue to make sure that our municipal employees are not shut out of this process, that they are still part of it and still have a seat at the table.
I was on the front lines of this issue in Stoneham when we were trying to get this passed. It took us a year or a year and a half longer than it should have. We could have capitalized on those savings sooner. It's a difficult process. I want to find ways to make that process easy. And the reality is, how do you go about doing it? You may have to come up with some compromise where there's a grandfathering provision or something like that, where new employees are under a different set of rules than other employees to get some significant changes passed. that's the reality. Because if you do this all or nothing proposal, sometimes it ends up being study committee forever and never gets done. We need to come up with new ideas to help these communities balance their budgets and have a pooling of healthcare costs so that can lower the cost for the towns. We were able to do it in Stoneham. I want to make those, use the experiences that I gained here, make that better for the state to help other communities.
And on a related, very related matter, what should the state's role be in helping towns like Stoneham and Winchester deal with the unfunded liability for the retiree health insurance benefits? Jason, could you start us off?
Again, I think this goes back to root cause, which is the problems within our healthcare system and the continuous rise in healthcare costs. So that's clearly the big issue that we need to be tackling. Let me say a few words about that. Then I'm going to do another question on this, and I'll make a specific point about retiree healthcare. Massachusetts, I think we can all be very proud that we lead the country when it comes to accessibility to healthcare. We have more than 97% of our residents who do have health insurance, and they are able to get the care they need for themselves and their loved ones. That's something we should all celebrate. That said, as the cost of healthcare continues to increase, it's making it more and more difficult because, as we all know, the co-pays are going up, deductibles have gone up, and the premium share has gone up. There's been, I serve on healthcare committee in the legislature, and there's been a lot of work going on in the last year, looking at our healthcare system, looking at our payment system, and how we could reform that. We have a fee-for-service system largely today, which creates an unfortunate incentive for more tests, more procedures, when maybe they aren't always absolutely necessary. So we have a proposal to reform how doctors and healthcare providers are paid, how they deliver care, which actually has the potential to not only restrain costs, but also make care better coordinated and high quality. I think that will help with our healthcare challenges for everybody, including retirees. One specific point I'll make in terms of our retiree healthcare is I think that if retirees are eligible for Medicare, then they should, cities and towns should be able to have their retirees go on to Medicare, and that would relieve some of the burden on
We have a question from the audience. We'll deal with this at the end, if we may. We will deal with this at the end.
Am I able to respond to that? But
I don't think everyone heard the concern, but this is not.
I don't, not to come to Jason's defense, but I don't think he said that.
Thank you. I don't believe that's what I heard either. And I'd like to move on if we could. Did you want to wrap up? All right, we're going to move on then.
I think you need to repeat the question for the other two.
Yes. We're going to come back to this question and get clear on it. What is the state's role in helping towns like Stoneham and Winchester deal with unfunded liability for the retiree health insurance benefits? Mike?
Okay, just on the broader base of healthcare, I mean, Massachusetts, we were sold a healthcare bill to cover everybody that has just been hugely expensive, that's been at the expense of removing critical resources for our towns. Okay, we have a national healthcare debate. It's like on the same formula. The incumbent was advocating as a state rep for national healthcare. I don't see the connection. I think you should be focused on local issues. That being said, okay, the local issues of retirement healthcare, we need to provide, just like with the GIC or anything else, the incentives to make the reforms necessary to allow us to fund the unfunded liabilities. That's a big, scary component of retirement in these communities. We need reforms on the local level, especially the local retirement boards. I think that they do a lot better job. They could join the system, work same application as GIC, pooling resources. There's resistance on the local level to do that because they lose control over, things that they feel they want to control. But, you know, it needs to be more universal.
And George?
The big issue here, I think, is in the two words, the unfunded mandates. All too often, the federal government and state government passes the buck, the towns and the local communities, and tells them, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, but then doesn't provide the resources behind those mandates to make it work. And it's true, our towns and cities are in a catch-22. They want to provide the kind of retirement benefits and healthcare benefits to their employees, and they're told that they've got to do this and that, and at the end of the day, they've got to face either raising taxes to pay for them or have the recipients of those services pay more. What Jason said, and what that audience member kind of alluded to, is a point. We do need to change the entire system. I don't think any doctor is out there looking to do an extra operation or order an extra test unless it's necessary. The problem is we've also, this is coming from a lawyer, we become too litigious. If you don't take every test that you can and something goes wrong, just naturally, people make an error or you miss something, all of a sudden the attorneys are ready to bring a lawsuit against the doctor. That is a major cost to our healthcare system, and any kind of reform that's got to look at tort reform. So with that said, I guess the short answer that I would give to your question, Patty, is that we've got to stop, not just in healthcare, but across the board, stop unfunded mandates. We should be working together on these issues.
Thank you all. And I want to remind everyone that these questions have come not from me, but from the community and have been sifted through from the Winchester League of Women Voters. So that's where all these questions have come from. But our next round, the questions will come from you. And just to give you a quick heads up, because this is new to all of us, we're going to begin on my right, your left, with these questions. The format for this is, if we divided everyone into A, B, and C. Candidate A asks a question for up to 30 seconds of candidate B, who will have 2 minutes to respond. But then candidate C can respond for another minute. And if there's needed, we can have a 15-second follow-up from the questioner. And we are at limited time. We're going to do our very best and make sure that everybody gets equal time doing this. So questions for candidates to candidates.
And do I get to choose who I...
Yes, you do.
Very good. Jason, this one's for you. No problem. In the local press, your staff and you have put out a lot of press releases and information about the need to keep special interests out of politics and to be independent and to do what's right for the folks. Can you please explain there how you can be independent when a lot of the funding for your campaign comes from the special interests that your articles say that you're against?
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, George. Actually, the fact is that any money that I've actually received in my campaign this year or in prior years from the advocacy organizations and unions is actually a small fraction of what I've actually raised. I don't have an exact number, but it's certainly less than 10%. The vast majority of the funding that I've raised to help run my campaigns has come from individual donors, contributing $25 or $50 or whatever they can afford, which I deeply appreciate. Since I've been in office, I'm not beholden to any organization or any person. I approach each issue that I face on its facts and its merits. One thing I learned early on when I worked for a company called McKinsey was what they call fact-based analysis. Don't make decisions based on opinions or anecdotes, but try to really get to what the facts are. Many of the issues we're talking about here today are not simple issues. So I try to learn as best I can by talking to people who are experts, talking to constituents. For example, on the healthcare issue, I've met with many different doctors and nurses in our district to get their perspective. And I try to understand the issue and then make a decision and vote based on what
Thank you. And would you care to give us a 1-minute follow-up?
Sure. You could probably plant the whole forest with the amount of mailers that have been sent out by certain unions for the incumbent, okay? It's a huge problem because it gets to send a message that is distorted and usually wrong about what's going on in the state. We need to have candidates. Everybody's running as an independent this year. I'm the only really independent that's running. I need your support, okay? I will go to the State House as your state representative and focus on local issues only and making sure that we get fair treatment at the State House. And that's been a problem.
May I have a follow-up? Jason, fact-based analysis may be well and good, but you have a 99.26% voting record with the speakers of the House with whom you served in these 2 years. What, if any, initiative run by the Republican minority, 15 of them, I'm sure they've come up with a few good ideas, have you backed independently from your leadership?
Thank you. And Jason, instead of getting to respond to that or use it as you wish, it's your chance to ask someone a question.
All right. Well, since George asked me one out, that's one of them in return. All right, George, you said that you are opposed to ballot question 3, which we agree or we see the Massachusetts Taxpayer Foundation said would cost the state $2.5 million. Yes, you proposed a plan, a tax plan, that the Massachusetts Taxpayer Foundation estimates would actually cost the state about the same amount of money. Cut all of our tax rates to 5%. That would also take out about $2.5 billion from our state budget.
Your question?
So how can you propose that plan and at the same time say you care about Stoneham and Winchester, you care about our schools and our safe streets? How can you balance those two competing priorities?
Jason, the fact is that the overtaxed population that we now have in Massachusetts, we are the 6th or 7th highest per capita taxed people in the United States. That is the biggest impediment to growing jobs and building the economy. You said that we had 60,000 jobs. Imagine if you and your colleagues in the legislature had kept taxes at 5% and done some of the real hard decisions and reined in spending, where we would have been with those numbers. And the Massachusetts Taxpayers Association, which the quotes that you have been saying, remember, has folks on the board like Michael Dukakis, probably the second biggest tax and spend governor that we've had since the current incumbent. So, yes, voting yes on question 3 would be difficult and would cause us a lot of problems. But if we were to go back to a stable tax system that is fair and creates a level playing field for the small businesses and entrepreneurs, we'll get out of this tough economic times faster and stronger.
Again, this seems like an endorsement for my Reform First plan, which I talked about 2 years ago, before the collapse in September of 2008. Talking about across the board state spending cuts. If we had implemented those over the last 2 years, we would have increased those savings and returned those savings to the community for education and property tax relief. Okay? The problem is that they raise taxes, the economy goes in the tank, you know what hits the fan, and then the problem is, oh, we can't cut now because, kill our services. It's a circular argument that they'll always win because there's no incentive for reforms. You need to send someone to the state legislature that has the will, has the independence, and has the ability to know where those savings are. I've worked there, I know where they are, I know agencies can do better, and I want to make it.
Thank you.
I think it's easy to pander to voters and say we should just cut all taxes. I think it takes more courage to be able to level with people and tell them what their costs are. There's no free lunch. The fact is that Massachusetts was Massachusetts in the 1970s. Through the 1990s, we cut taxes over and over again. And the fact is today, Massachusetts is actually 31st out of all the states in terms of our state and local tax burden as a percentage of our income. Which I think is probably the best way to measure it. So we're in the bottom half of all states in terms of our tax burden at this point in time.
And we're going to leave that question until one of you brings us back to it. And we'll start now with Mike. question, whomever.
I appreciate it. I guess this question goes to the incumbent, but obviously we'll all take a shot at it. If the taxes that were raised, this question goes to the incumbent and the Republican as well. If you pass a tax increase, do you find that that provides any disincentive at all to business? You think it's a total plus? There's no negative aspect to raising taxes?
Jason?
Thanks for the question, Mike. Of course, there's an impact. Like I said, there's no free lunch. But the reason we're elected is to make tough decisions. And when we were facing a budget gap of $5 billion in the fiscal year 09, when the sales tax was increased, the legislature and the government tried to take a balanced approach. Half of that $5 billion gap was closed with spending cuts, and painful spending cuts that impacted our communities and our citizens. 1/4 of that gap was closed using federal stimulus money for healthcare and education, and then 1/4 of it was closed largely with the sales tax increase. That increase brought in $600,000 to Stony and Winchester that would not otherwise have come in. A big chunk of that was allocated to local aid. So that's money that went right into helping us keep teachers in the classroom, police, and firefighters on the streets. It also, a significant chunk of that went to the MBTA, so that we didn't have to have fare increases and toll increases, which would put another enormous burden on people. So yes, I acknowledge there's an impact, and I've talked to small business owners, particularly on the New Hampshire border, who have been impacted by this, and I know this is a very tough issue. But when I look at what we need for our communities, which is the hat that I wear, I felt overall we took a responsible, balanced approach to dealing with an unprecedented fiscal crisis.
We hear this and we hear about these cuts that were so helpful to bridge the gap. But let's take a quick look at them. In Massachusetts, we still have the prevailing wage law. Repealing the prevailing wage law, or at least adopting the federal standards for the prevailing wage law, according to Citizens for Limited Taxation, would have saved $175 million last year. That was not taken. We didn't do a statewide hiring freeze. Since 2009, there are 2,000 more employees under in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts than there were prior to that. Jason made a very interesting comment, which I think shows us the kind of problem that we have back in March, Jason, when you were on that Randy Perlow show at Stone. Do you know, and I have no reason to doubt you on this, if you were to fire every person who receives a payroll check from the state, everybody, teachers to the janitors to the people working on the highways, you would still have a gap. You would still have a deficit. That tells you that there's something structural wrong with what's going on in Boston and Beacon Hill. That's got to change.
And,
Do I get a follow-up?
and we do get 15 seconds.
Okay. Again, taxes always first, reform second. I'm going to make that change. I'm going to put reforms first. And again, key pieces of legislation like casinos, not done. Okay, keystone piece of legislation, unaccomplished, no jobs, no growth.
Thank you. You all are doing very well with this format, so thank you. And we have another question, please, from our Republican candidate.
I guess this one will go to our independent candidate, Mike Rotundi, who has run for this office twice before. Once as a Republican, once as a Democrat in a primary, who recently ran for office in Stoneham as our clerk and was handily defeated on all of those 3 elections. Mike, have you got the message that the folks have not looked to you for the leadership that they want? And what do you think you bring this year to this race, just a few 10 months after your last race, that would be different from the prior ones?
Well, what this demonstrates is that I have been put forward by people who say, Mike, run because we need someone in there who's going to make a difference. And I'm willing to do that regardless if I win or lose. Okay? The important thing is to get ideas out and to get some reforms made. The problem from the Republicans' perspective, zero experience on the local level. Zero. Okay? Incumbent, 6 months on the finance board. This is not enough time to understand the difficulties of local government. It takes years to understand the pain and the nuances. It's easy to run for office. It's hard to run on the local level and be successful. I've been there, I've done that. I've been moderator for almost 18 years. I've tried different positions because I see a need and people ask me to do it, and I'm willing to do it, and I don't care if I win or lose, but the point is, it's an election every 2 years, and we need people to challenge and pass those ideas along. Hopefully, the voters will vote someone independent and fresh and looking out for your interests on November 7th.
Well, I'll agree with Mike that I think it is very helpful when you serve in the state legislature to have experience working at the local level, to have volunteered, to have worked in the schools. I served on the Winchester Finance Committee for 3 years, not 6 months, and learned a lot about local municipal finance. And I do think that's something that my Republican opponent does not bring to the table. I think that local involvement and community knowledge serves you extremely well.
Just as a follow-up, what I bring to the table is what the citizens of Stoneham and Winchester want. They want someone who's paid the tax, who has kids in schools, who looks to their government and sees that it's out of touch and out of whack. And even though I'm the Republican candidate, I don't owe anybody anything. I'm going in with an open mind. I ask for your vote.
Bedrock about communities, and it's the future for the economy of Massachusetts. That's what our state is. It's really a knowledge economy. I've made it a top priority in the legislature to fight for reform of the state's education funding formula, Chapter 70, introduce legislation to reform it and to address this issue. And I will continue to make this a priority. My question to you is, George, so how would you try to ensure we have adequate and equitable funding for schools in Stoneham and Winchester?
Absolutely great question, Jason. I appreciate it very much. You know, during your 2 years in the legislature, you followed a Chapter 70 funding, which was supposed to be the 17.5% formula. And I know it's a very confusing thing, and a lot of folks in the audience and at home probably don't know the details of it. Stoneham has lost, in 2 years, $530,000, and Winchester has lost $300,000 in funding that otherwise would have gone to the towns. While other cities, not in our district, have benefited from the funding formula. Obviously, the funding formula needs to be changed and it needs to be addressed. What we had in 2006, they were supposed to have a 6-year period by which Chapter 70 would have been tweaked and worked so that there would be parity across the Commonwealth. But we don't see that kind of parity, Jason. We see the quote-unquote better off towns getting shorted by the system, while folks in Boston and the big cities, dominated by your leadership, are getting more funding than they otherwise would have if the pie was more evenly distributed. I would suggest, Jason, that with somebody with a 99.2%, 26% voting record with the leadership, you are not the right person to challenge them on this critical issue for Stoneham and Winchester.
Again, local experience makes a difference. I have seen the pain of Chapter 70. In Stoneham, we've been talking about this issue for 10 to 15 years. I've been down to State House for rallies 10 years ago. Okay, enough is enough. We need to send someone there that has the motivation to say, listen, my communities are getting shortchanged, and we're going to do something about it. And if I have to sit in front of someone's office for a week to get their attention, I'll do it. But we need a change in the procedures and why we're getting the short end of the stick. This is not fair. We need, and I based my performance and career on making sure things are fair. So this has really hurt me.
Follow?
I would just say I think my Republican opponent continues to play a little fast and loose with the facts again. The fact is Winchester, since Chapter 70, following the town's rapid enrollment growth over the last several years, has actually seen their education funding increase, not decrease, even in this recession. And that's a credit to the legislature and the governor making
Thank you.
Not under Chapter 74, but just in general.
Thank you. Mike, question, please.
Is it George?
I'll pick one. You guys have
No, I want to make sure that we're following.
We've had two from George and two from Jason.
Okay,
Only one
okay.
from Mike.
Again, how do the candidates who have attachments to political parties that have been made clear here, how are they going to distinguish themselves and move away from the influence of those parties, special interests, and big money that are going to affect how they vote and put forward the initiatives that we need to accomplish for our communities?
Mike, as you very well know, in the Massachusetts House of Representatives, there are 15 Republicans out of 160 members. You can caucus with the Republicans in a room. That small group of folks have held the line on taxes, fought for folks, and put up initiatives that sometimes are adopted by the majority. I'm coming in as a Republican, but I'll tell you, I voted for Democrats in the past, I voted for Republicans in the past, and unenrolled folks. I'm coming in with an open mind, and I owe nobody nothing, to use the alliteration that we like. I haven't gotten a dime from the Republican Party, other than the local one in Suffolk and Winchester. I haven't met with anyone, I haven't gotten any talking points from the Republican Party. I am really an independent who, if elected, will go to Beacon Hill, and I'm ready to work across the aisles and ready to work with anyone to make sure that we represent Stoneham and Winchester to the best possible way we can. The problem with the two of you is that you both have a history. I'm coming in as a taxpayer, as a citizen who's really wanting to come in with a fresh view. And you know what? Sometimes that experience of having no experience brings the fresh perspective we need. And across the state, there are Republican candidates just like me who've never run for office. They're stepping up to the plate because the system hasn't worked.
Jason.
I'm a proud member of the Democratic Party because I have a certain set of core values, and those don't change when times are good or times are bad. What I believe is that every person, no matter their background, religion, or race or ethnicity, should be treated with dignity and respect. And every person and every child deserves a chance to develop their full potential. That's why I believe in the power of education, which is how I got to where I am through the public school. That's why I believe healthcare should be a basic human right. That's why I believe we should protect and preserve to the best of our ability our environment so we leave the world better for our children and grandchildren. That's a set of core values that I have that guide the decisions I make. But when I'm focusing on any particular issue and I have to decide and vote, I don't make that decision based on what the Democratic Party says or what the Speaker of the House says or what some advocacy group says. I listen to everybody. I evaluate that issue on its own merits, and then I make my own decision. I believe in the best interest of our district.
Well, I get the call. Thank you. I'm glad everyone here is making the admission that they evaluate candidates independently and everybody's vying for the independent position. Okay? Like most voters in this district, everybody votes for a candidate they feel who's going to best do the job, despite the political party. And that's what we need people to focus on.
Thank you. I think this has been quite an enlightening section of the discussion, and I thank everyone for their flexibility in doing this today, despite lack of notice, perhaps, which was intended. I have time to ask one more question, and rather than making it uneven for one candidate to ask it, I'm going to go back to the voters' questions, and depending on how quickly you answer, maybe two, but I think one. All of you have identified quality of education as a top priority, but the vast majority of education funding and decision-making occurs at the local level. In what way will you and your colleagues on Beacon Hill positively impact public education without interfering with the local authority and beyond Chapter 70 fundraising? And Jason, if I can begin with you.
Great. Thank you for this very important question. I'll mention two things that actually the legislature acted on related to education this past session that I'm very proud of. First is an anti-bullying bill that we very seriously. The Winchester and Stoneham schools, I think, have done a very good job making sure they have anti-bullying programs in place, but unfortunately, that hasn't been true across the board, and this will make sure that all schools, school districts take this seriously. We also passed legislation related to childhood nutrition to try to encourage our schools to get the junk food out, so we're not serving candy and soda and vending machines, and also to have schools partner with local farms so that we can actually bring fresh, produce into our schools as well. So those are two examples of areas where the state is partnering with local school districts to help our schools. As I mentioned earlier, when it comes to education, my top priority, and this is where the state plays an important role, is how we allocate state education funding dollars. Most of the money for education does come from local sources of revenue like property taxes, but about 40% does come from the state government, and that is allocated by the Chapter 70 formula. And traditionally, communities like ours have not fared as well under that formula as they should, and that's a top priority for me to reform the Chapter 70 formula.
George, please.
If that is all true, Jason, do you support changing the standards in Massachusetts to follow the national standards? If you follow your House leadership and our governor, I would venture to say you do. That is not the way we ought to go. We in Massachusetts, despite the problems with education, have the best schools in the country. And adopting a national standard will do nothing to promote us. We should be leaders on this. We have been leaders on education standards and education resources being used for our students and for the classroom and for other projects in local schools. To get back to the main question, it's very important that critical decisions remain in local hands, that we do not nationalize education, which I fear if the progressive liberals in the House continue their way, that's where we're headed. That, if anything, is the most important reason not to vote for Jason and his colleagues across the state this year.
And Mike, please.
Thank you. Any one of us would love to make a huge change to the Chapter 70 so we get fair treatment. But beyond that, we need to scrap for every dollar that there is. Grant funds, pothole money, sidewalk money, anything that I can bring into this district is one less thing that you guys have to pay for, and it saves money or cuts from schools and education. I'm willing to fight for those extra dollars any way possible. Nothing is too small for this district. I will fight for you. I will make sure that we're getting our fair treatment. And when it comes to the local level, that's the best we can do. The local level is set up. You voters have to vote in your school committees and your selectmen and go and make changes on a local level. You need to do the best thing a state rep can do is fight for those very few extra dollars that there are left. And I'm willing to do that. And you cannot be fooled by, I set up a study committee for Chapter 70. There's been a study committee for 15 years, okay? That's dead on arrival, that's what that means. You have to know how to get things done in the state legislature. And as an independent, they will be fighting for my vote, and I will use that vote to make sure we get our fair treatment.
Thank you. Well, the succinctness of our candidates has allowed one final quick question.
Never ending.
Yeah, but you've been great.
Anybody know the Patriots score?
Okay, this is a very attentive audience and really listening to you. And it is a follow-up on the reduction of the sales and use tax on ballot question 3. So if it passes, and this is a 1 minute because some of you have already addressed this partially. If ballot 3 question passes, there's speculation that the state government won't implement it. So will you support the will of the majority should it pass and argue for reduction of that tax down to 3%? So let's just take 1 minute on this because it's been partially addressed before. Yes.
When we did address it, I mentioned that a lot of the folks who are voting for Chapter 3 are doing it not because they want a 3% income, but they want to send a very clear message to the legislature. And in the past, the legislature has taken initiatives like ballot initiatives like this and have not followed them. it is clear that if it passes, the folks who voted for it want taxes decreased. I think if I'm elected, I would understand that mentality. We would try our best to manage within it, but I don't think it's possible to manage with 3%. And I think the folks who are voting for it know that as well. We need to get back to a 5-5-5 program that will provide the stability we need to grow our economy, have entrepreneurs start building the economy again, and move forward to raise revenues for our state.
Thank you. And Mike?
Respecting the will of the people is very important, okay? And we need to implement reforms. It's just not going to happen with the incumbent. It's not going to happen with the makeup of the legislature. We need a change. I'm willing to go there and make those tough decisions. I know where there are efficiencies can be made. I have some experience, and we need to implement those reforms first. Taxes second, reforms first, okay? And when it comes to again, I support back to the 5%, and I'm going to tackle as much reforms as possible. If those reforms to lead to more savings than 5%, then great.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's disingenuous to say, well, let's vote for this, and then the legislature will just go against the will of the people and put the sales tax back to 5%. I, for one, would not do that. I don't think that is the appropriate response if this were to pass. I think we need to work to educate ourselves and our friends and neighbors as to what the consequences are, that there's no free lunch here, and understand what the impact is, and then let people make an informed decision. And like I said, if this were to pass, I think there will be very significant cuts that will have to be made all across state government. We will all feel the impact of that in our communities. And the other thing that will happen is we will put even more pressure on our property taxes at the local level to try to continue to fund our schools and our public safety and our libraries.
And that ends the debate part of our forum. And I would now like to ask our candidates to present their closing statements. And they have 2 minutes to do that each. And before we begin, we drew straws, and Mike will begin.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful debate. Thank the league for setting it up. Thank the attendees, my wife, family, friends. This is a difficult process. I've been involved in local government now for almost 18 years. I know the struggles. I would like a laser focus on making sure we have an economy that bolsters jobs and business so we can have better growth and provide those extra revenues, and that's the best way we can get out of this bad situation. I will be almost against any tax increase that we possibly can at this point. I mean, it is a very tough situation to be whacking people with taxes at this point. Again, I am a local guy. Grew up in this community. Family from both Stoneham and Winchester. I care about these districts and this community more than just from a political office perspective. I have family that have children in the schools, seniors at the senior center, and people living in houses and several small businesses that are run by different family members. So this is a very close and personal thing. We need to make the decisions that will implement reforms. I put forward plans in the past that still apply today of reforming first, taxing second. Again, I don't think it's going to get done, especially with the incumbent and the political party system. It's just not going to work. We need to send a new, refreshing message to the State House. I will provide that message. I am hurting like a lot of people, and there's no more motivation to make changes when you're hurting just like a lot of people. And I'm ready to go there and do the tough work and implement the reforms we need to make. I appreciate your vote on November 2nd, and thank you very much.
Perfectly timed. Thank you so much. And our second candidate, closing comments are Jason, please.
Thank you, Patty. And I want to thank my opponents for this spirited but civil debate that has focused on many important issues that are facing our communities. The last few years have been very challenging. And I know many people are worried and are frustrated that things are not getting better faster. But we are moving forward, and we are making significant progress. Working together, I'm proud of what we have been able to accomplish in Stoneham and Winchester over the last 2 years. Saving the Stone Zoo, investing in local economic development, preserving as best we can education funding, and moving forward with new school building projects, flood mitigation, and major improvements to our local public transportation. If I have the privilege of being re-elected and continuing to serve our great communities, I will work every single day to push forward local economic development opportunities that will create jobs and will strengthen our communities. Second, Chapter 70 reform to ensure adequate and equitable funding for all of our schools. Third, healthcare reform that controls healthcare costs and makes quality care more affordable for our families, our seniors, and our small businesses. And lastly, government reform to make our state government more efficient, accountable, and responsive to our needs and concerns. Together, we can continue to move our communities and our state forward to a brighter future. I ask for your vote on Tuesday, November 7th. Thank you very much.
And thank you. Closing comment.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you to the Winchester League of Women Voters for sponsoring the debate. Thank you to Mike and to Jason, who I think I agree with Jason wholeheartedly that this debate has been an excellent opportunity, a very cordial and a civil one at that, to let the voters of Stoneham and Winchester know where we stand on the issues and where we want the state to go. I come to this race not as a career politician. I am a citizen. I am a resident of Stoneham. I have been a resident of Stoneham since 2002. I have children that I want to raise in Stoneham. We love Winchester. It's a great town. What we have is a systemic problem at Beacon Hill. We have a one-sided political system that rewards folks who are in the pockets of special interests, whether it's unions, whether it is folks who continually use public resources as their main means of income. On education issues, we have a representative who has never voted with the minority and has never bucked his majority leadership. That is wrong. Fresh perspective and to offer real change, but not just change for change's sake. We need to have a business community that knows that the system is fair, that will promote growth, and that will get us out of this economic mess in the fastest way possible by hiring folks, by allowing folks the ability to the best that they can to grow their own businesses and open new businesses. I feel, and I hope you do too, that I am the best person capable, if elected, to promote that as a light bulb, as a laser beam. That's where we need to go. I ask for your vote. I ask for your support. Thank you very much.
I want to thank all of our candidates for this terrific debate. Our Republican candidate, George Chirkungus.
Good enough. Like I told people, you don't need to pronounce it. Just have to recognize it.
And our current state representative and Democratic candidate, Jason Lewis, and Michael Rotundi, our independent candidate. And thanks to all of you. And I suspect that any format on the feedback on the format would be most welcome.
Wonderful job moderating.
So thank you all. And just in closing, I hope you all enjoyed the Winchester League of Women Voters Day at the Races Forum. And before we leave, I want to thank Patty Muldoon for moderating the event, WinCam and Stone TV access for taping and broadcasting the event, and all the many volunteers who helped us pull this forum together. I also want to extend a special thanks to our subcommittee, which was Jean Herbert, Joanne Michaelak, and Susan Bergicchio.
And also, lastly, I want to encourage you all to join the Winchester League of Voters and be part of this exciting and worthwhile organization. And before we leave today, I hope you'll wish all our three candidates the best of luck on Election Day. And again, don't forget to vote on November 2nd. Thank you very much.